Okay. Okay. Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Ми
Hello,
почнемо.
dear colleagues. We will start literally in a minute. Oh, we need to start now. Not all speakers are yet here. Everyone is complaining about not being able to connect for unknown reason. That's why I will kindly request you, Luba.
Люба?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, great. Can I ask you to look out for Taina, Tarana, and Tatiana joining so that we can give them co-host? Are you co-host already?
Me?
Okay.
I don't see it. How do I know whether I'm a co-host? No, I don't see it.
You will see it in your participant status.
I think I'm not a co-host, but if I'm not, I can share my presentation.
You will be. Пане Геннадію, пані Любу теж треба зробити кохостом, щоб вона могла розшарювати свої
Gennady, please make Luba co-host so she can share her presentations too. Great, great. Well, then we will have to start while we wait. Hello, dear colleagues. I again apologize for you not being able to see my video. My equipment seems to be malfunctioning. I have sound but no video. Hopefully you don't have air raid alerts. Greetings at the second event of the series that we do under the preparation, in the framework of preparation of this new targeted state program for counteraction of trafficking in human beings. We are Center for Democracy Development with the initiative of Ministry of Social Policy, and with support of the Ministry of Social Policy and the community and the Caucasus Equal Opportunities and Higher Public Administration School, we conduct 3 events. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, we had a surrogacy event. Today, institutionalized pornography, and next time we'll be having another one about interpretation. A considerable part of our experts are English speaking, and we have simultaneous interpretation. You can connect to it by pressing the button interpretation. It looks like a globe, and there you can select the language you are comfortable listening, English or Ukrainian. If you are not speaking, please don't turn on the microphone, not to distract us, because we have a lot of people online. In half an hour before the event, we had 1,035 applications. So if everyone turns on the microphone, it will be havoc. In addition to the partners I mentioned, we want to thank OSCE office for expert local representation, local office in Ukraine of OSCE for expert support, and also to European Migrant Association, Coalition of Combating Trafficking, International Women's Platform of Actions. The issue of trafficking is mentioned in many international treaties that Ukraine signed and ratified. It's not a news for you. You probably know all of them. And I give floor to my colleague, who also works with UN Women as an expert, Ella Lamach, so that she could tell some introductory words. Thank you, Maria, for this intro and for organizing this event. I'm a consultant of UN Women in Ukraine for the Ministry of Social Policy in Ukraine. And as Maria already mentioned, this event, the preliminary event, and the next events that you will have on the 29th, they are all focused on one goal: to improve the understanding and to give knowledge, to explain new challenges on the topics that relate to combating trafficking in human beings. And as Maria mentioned, we are preparing a new governmental program for counteracting trafficking. And it's important, both on oblast level and on local level, to understand these topics. You see, international treaties speak about dangers, especially during wartime, during military conflicts, danger for women and children.
І сексуальне рабство, сексуальна експлуатація. Всі ці теми з протидії торгівлі людьми, вони напряму пов'язані з реалізацією державної стратегії з гендерної рівності і плану дій до стратегії, пов'язані і ми говоримо це як синергія, та? Окрім державної стратегії, це ще і виконання зобов'язань України, таких як виконання резолюції Ради безпеки ООН 1325. Таким чином, всі теми протидії торгівлі людьми і протидія сексуальному насильству під час військового конфлікту та інші теми, вони взаємопов'язані між собою. Важливо, що на національному рівні, на обласному рівні, на місцевому рівні всі програми повинні бути в синергії, доповнювати і підтримувати одна одну. І таким чином заходи, які ми сьогодні проводимо, вони є важливими для того,
So the events that we conduct today are important for the future, so that you could see how these topics, how are they touching other programs, contacting other programs, especially strategies of local level, so that you have mutual support and you understand what is happening on the high level and what challenges are there. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for being present on the next event too. Hopefully all these events will be useful for you, and the knowledge that you will receive on this event and the previous event and the next event will be useful and used by you. Thank you, Maria.
Марія з нами?
Maria, are you with us? Yes, I apologize. The connection is dropping and I don't know why. Thank you, Ella. Next one is Oksana. Oksana, state expert for counteraction to trafficking in human beings, domestic violence, and from the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine. Greetings, all participants, both from the previous session and from the current session who joined recently. As Maria and Ella mentioned, we conduct these meetings as a part of organizing the program, the state program for the period until 2028. And we as the Ministry of Social Policy, as a national coordinator in counteracting to trafficking, already started a new work, development of new governmental program. And this event is conducted for your understanding of new international laws, but also we want to listen to, we want to be it to be useful for us too, for our experts. We plan strategic planning session on the April the 30th of this year, and these events are conducted with vision to form a council. We want you all to join on the April 30th in development of new state program. So we will ask you to write your proposals, your measures you want to see in the new governmental program. Because the challenges are now different, and the program we have now is old, outdated, and of course it's for different time period. So please join our common work, send your proposals. I wish you very fruitful work. Thank you, Oksana. So, and to finalize greetings, I invite Valentina Litovske, who represents public administration school, higher public administration school, and she will tell you about the certificates that you are supposed to receive for listening to this course. Please, Valentina.
Пані Валентина?
Valentina?
Щось пані Валентини не чути. Можливо, мабуть,
I
у неї теж проблеми.
cannot hear Valentina. She might have problems with connection. Hopefully she will be able to tell this later. And now I give floor to Miss Alexandra Novikova, who represents European Migrant Network. And she will tell what are the peculiarities of the situation for Ukrainian citizens' approach. Please, your floor. Thank you, Maria. Greetings, I'm Alexandra. I represent European Network of Migrants, and I am migrant myself for 13 years. I live in Greece, so I have very clear picture of what is happening specifically with women abroad. Taking into account the special situation with this full-scale invasion, many women left Ukraine and were forced to leave the country. I wanted to say a couple of words what our organization I'm representing. The Network of Women Migrants, it's a non-partisan organization which is headed by migrants, and it is an umbrella for 50 organizations from over 20 countries. And this network does advocacy, protects the rights and freedoms of refugees and ethnic minorities. Some of the directions of work of the platform is combating violence against women and girls, political participation of migrants, social integration, and advocacy for labor policies on the level of European Union. My personal addition for today's event is migrant women are very, very vulnerable to any type of exploitation, including sexual online exploitation. This is due to overlap of several factors, legal illiteracy, language barriers, limited access to information. Why is it happening? Why migrants, women, and women who live abroad, why are they so vulnerable? It can be related to quite complicated status, legal status, like lack of documents. Or, for example, a woman abroad is afraid to go to police. Because she's afraid the police might deport her, or threats of, withholding some rights of hers, like a right to work or something. Often they are poor, these women, and they have to agree to risky jobs, including online proposals, like exchange of sexual services to a place to live or food. Lack of security skills for the internet also contributes. And some of the other factors I personally can tell you from my personal experience is language and cultural barriers. Add one more vulnerability layer. When a woman is in stress, when she's not at home, when she doesn't know the language, when she doesn't know the legal mechanisms of this country, or maybe cultural traditions of the country of her stay, she can become a victim of exploitation, target of threats and manipulations. My own experience, I'm sure our speakers will tell you about mechanisms, how women can protect themselves, but I can tell you, I see it when a woman comes to another country, she is instantly attacked online. For example, if the woman mentions in which city she lives, she instantly receives a lot of messages proposing special proposals, like anything. It could be proposal to be a model and to receive a lot of money per week, or a proposal to send pictures. Currently, the resource called OnlyFans is a very dangerous one for migrants, because currently a woman is not, doesn't even have to create the account there. She can just work through intermediaries. She can just give pictures, and that's enough to be posted there. What can be added as a recommendation? Increase of digital literacy would help. Training programs for women, security measures in the internet, how to identify online exploitation, access to support information, securing different languages for information of
допомогою, тому що це теж дуже великий фактор, що жінки просто не знають, де шукати допомоги. І, звичайно ж, це правовий захист, це розробка політик, які гарантують захист жертвам насильства незалежно від їхнього міграційного статусу. І, наприклад, на жаль, в Греції нам відомо, що ці механізми не працюють і вони, скоріше все, просто не існують. Дякую вам за увагу. Це все з мого боку. Дякую.
Пані Марія, ви з нами? Я так розумію, у нас пані Марію вибило з зв'язку?
Я вже на місці.
Окей, дякую, Марія.
Добре, дякую, пані Олександрі. Ми переходимо від
sorry,
вітань.
the internet problems on the interpreter side. And we are getting from specifics on the location. And the first one of the experts that I invite is Tatiana Kotlarenko, who is independent consultant on human rights, now works in Switzerland. And she will tell us about the international standards and approaches to combating against online exploitation of women. Please, Tatiana, tell us.
Thank you so much, Maria. It is a true pleasure to be here with you today discussing this very important subject, online sexual exploitation, specifically of Ukrainian women and children. I would like to take you back to the beginning of the war, where as the anti-trafficking advisor for OSCE ODIHR, I conducted a survey of Ukrainian women and children fleeing from Ukraine. And what we found is that many women and children, both, were being targeted by those seeking to produce pornographic content and child sexual abuse materials of children, as well as with offers, grooming, etc. online at that time. The other thing that I am sure my former colleagues will tell you about from the Office of the Special Representative is that there was a Reuters study done where the search for Ukrainian women sex slaves, Ukrainian women for sex, Ukrainian women being raped, etc. online, depending on the country, went up from up to 200 to 400%, depending upon where. So when we see abuse and vulnerability of women, especially in situations of conflict, they're become a major target to various forms of trafficking, but for women and children specifically, trafficking for sexual exploitation. I wanted to actually talk a little bit about demand and the issues that are related to that. Ukrainian women and children specifically are being targeted for online sexual exploitation because there's a massive demand for it. That massive demand is very much intertwined with the pornography that is being produced, and which creates a strong focus specifically on their exploitation. As has been said by the previous speaker, just the basic fact that they're fleeing from situations of conflict makes them significantly vulnerable with different offers. I could also tell you that a training that we have done specifically for those working with those fleeing the conflict in Ukraine, were being even targeted at the training with different offers, including OnlyFans and others as well. What I'd like to also talk about a little bit is the ever-evolving nature of online sexual exploitation. Whilst there's a lot of focus on traditional forms of sexual exploitation, and the picture that many of us have of, somebody coming, speaking to the woman, offering her some sort of a job somewhere, most, if not all, oftentimes now, elements of trafficking that are happening for sexual exploitation are happening online. Women are recruited online. Many times they may not even meet their trafficker, and they're being exploited online as well. They could be exploited for production of pornographic materials. They could be exploited for webcamming. They could be exploited in a variety of different ways. The other piece that is important to talk about now is the changes that are coming, even in terms of technology. Now everybody is talking about artificial intellect, AI. It is important to note that whilst it can be used for good, traffickers are beginning and have been now using AI to expand their operations, meaning that AI can be used to locate vulnerable women and girls or children. It can be used to groom them, and it can be used essentially as a pimp as well. And that is a danger because as technology is evolving, so is the capacity to target and exploit more and more vulnerable women and girls. The other part that I want to discuss actually is even the targeting of children who are currently in Ukraine for the purposes of production of child sexual abuse materials. It is important to really think about this because this is something that is going on. While the rest of the world is talking about protecting children in Ukraine and making significant efforts, there are many who look to exploit the same children. I know as of about a year and a half ago, there were at least 300 cases of children who were removed from situations of sexual exploitation online. And this is a worrying factor, and there need to be significant efforts made to this regard. The other thing I want to talk about really is the understanding of different models of what actually, or the model that actually prevents the creation of demand and normalization of sexual exploitation of women online, which is the equality model. If it is very, very key for Ukraine to actually really think about ensuring that the model that protects women, children, and even men in this circumstance is applied, where buying of those that are vulnerable, which is anybody in any situation of commercial sexual acts, should be actually penalized. And if Ukraine makes significant efforts to do so and recognizes that that is the model that will actually protect those that are very vulnerable all the time, or any woman or child in Ukraine, then there's going to be a significant effort made in terms of their protection and stopping sexual exploitation online. The other part too is the recognition of the harms of pornography, the fact that it creates demand for online sexual exploitation and is a huge driver. So with that, I will stop and hand over to some of my other colleagues to talk about some of the other factors that engage on this. And I would like to really thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about these important topics today.
Дякую, Тетяно. Завжди раді
Thank you,
вам.
Tatiana. We are always glad to see you at our events. Thank you for your expertise. Hopefully, we will see you again at our events. Thank you. The next one, with your permission, I will invite to the floor Ms. Taran Bagirova, who is Program Specialist of the Office of Special Representative and Coordinator of OSCE for Counteracting to Trafficking. And Ms. Taranova will tell us about risks and counteraction to trafficking and sexual exploitation online. Please, Taranova, your floor. Ms. Taranova, your floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting the OEC. I'm glad to see some of my former colleagues and also to address and support Ukraine in their efforts. So we live in a world that increasingly driven by technology, and the internet has become a double-edged sword now for everyone. As much as it enables connectivity, education, and growth, it also opens the door to criminals and eases the scale of their operations. And this is not a new phenomenon. We have already noticed it back in 2007 when there was a comparative report on demand for sex tourism and trafficking in Jamaica, Japan, Netherlands, and the United States concluded that technology has become the single greatest facilitator of the commercial sex trade and sexual exploitation in all of the countries observed, except that there are some countries still had the word of the mouth continue to prevail. And 18 years ago, it was already clear that traffickers already use technology and scale. And now in 2025, the problem grew unprecedented levels that urges actions by governments, civil society, and international organizations. Just to give you a small figure, and this figure that shows already 75% of surveyed survivors was soared in 2007, and whose exploitation began in 2004 or later, reported being advertised online for sex. And in Austria, when we were assessing the Austria's anti-trafficking efforts in 2017 with a former special representative, we already heard from the law enforcement that internet was used in 74% of cases of trafficking cases. So the scale of it already was clear back in 2017. So, and we could see already in 2025, based on the numerous research cases, survivor data, confirm the technology is used in every stages of human trafficking. The victims are recruited online through grooming, loverboy technique, which is now widespread across Europe. When we were assessing France a couple of years ago, and also the UK, the largest share of victims and the potential victims identified by NGOs were actually those who were exploited online. And most of them were teenage girls. And this such a massive scale actually led France to have a criminal provision or criminal law specifically focusing on child sexual abuse. And any abuse of sexual intent is now considered to be a statutory rape in the criminal code of France. So what we could see also that their mechanisms of control vary from jurisdictions and jurisdiction. There is an increase in debt bondage, threat of violence against victims and their family members. Perpetrators threaten victims to expose their photos and videos of sexual acts to their families, schools, and communities. So this actual technology shifted traditional perception of control mechanism, as victims are often may be physically free to move around, but psychologically coerced, which is difficult to prove. There is no visual indicator. Just to give you an example of a real case scenario that was reported by the news a couple of days ago, when a 13-year-old girl in the United States trafficked by a 29-year-old man for sexual exploitation. The man actually was online and presented himself as 17 years old and started grooming the teenager into sending him sexually explicit photos. And once it was done, then he actually forced her to make a Grindr account where he arranged for the girl to be picked up by adult men in the country. And he was able to actually have 4 men to sexually abuse and rape that child. And he used the grooming technique to lower her inhibition, and also those techniques involved into threatening to inflict harm on her mother. So with the fears that the mother can be hurt, the child actually submitted to all the violences against her, and endured such a huge violence against herself. And this mother then noticed that there is something wrong with the child. And then she actually reported the case to the police, and they identified a massive scale of the exploitation that happened against the child by four men just within a couple of months. So the technology also enables exploitation of victims online through advanced technology tools like webcam. In a report published by Internet Watch Foundation, and they presented during the Alliance 2 weeks ago in Vienna, reveals that 27% of increase what is now called a self-generated child sexual abuse materials. So but this is also what we actually observed in Latvia during our country assessment, that what's called a self-generated child sexual abuse materials went to unprecedented levels, and that at some point they had to cut all those, the host of the internet host providers in Latvia. But then when they analyzed the cases, they realized actually there's a third-party involvement in all of those so-called self-generated sexual abuse materials. And the child was instructed to stay in a specific pose to show a specific part of the body to the webcam. So that already brings this crime, child sexual abuse materials or child sexual abuse online, which is often a different crime set in the criminal codes of the countries, very close to trafficking. So as we can see, there is lots of, and I heard a lot of colleagues already mentioned OnlyFans. There are different other internet platforms that actually perpetuate and facilitate trafficking in human beings. These are not only those that are actually do the sexual advertising, but also escort websites, massage services, dating websites, hobby boards, and broader classified advertising platforms. These are all increasingly risky, and they are facilitating and enabling trafficking in human beings for children and also for young adults. So this is just to give you an example of a chat that my colleagues have gathered through looking into the chats in the Telegram website, chat platforms, where we see work for females, particularly targeting Ukrainian girls, and asking them to what's this called now, self-generated videos, or to take them the explicit videos. This is what happened when, in the beginning of the war against Ukraine, we were discussing with lots of participating states around the risks that the online, but also offline, against the Ukrainian girls. And every time we were getting the news saying that they cannot find any cases. But then when my colleagues actually looked at the website, and they could actually see those advertising, which is a clear depiction that there is online trafficking of women that exist, and then it's just a matter of the times that needs to be found. And this is another one where we see also the shift between 2022 and what we see in 2023 is that in the beginning we could see a lot of victims are being targeted to be victims. So basically the girls up to 60, of the women up to 65 years old, whoever has a phone or a notebook to take their videos or photos. And then what we could see as a shift in modus operandi is that now we could see that there are also recruiting people who would actually disseminate all of those works that is done through the different adult websites, including the OnlyFans. So now we spoke about a lot of the problems, and the problem is acute and requires action both from the policymakers, legislators, law enforcement, and civil society. Now let's speak what we can help. And in the past few years, we've done a plethora of guidance documents, and we delved into online risks, and we called utilizing technology as a preemptive and preventive tool. In our recent publication, where we mapped sexual websites across the OECD, we collected information on the names, URLs, the size of online ads. We looked into the types of services and prices of those services. We examined ethnicities, nationalities advertised, and links to social media profiles. And based on all of those information, we compiled red flag indicators. I will just list these are the list, and they're also available on our website, but I will just mention, in the interest of the time, a few of them that we think is a clear depiction that there is a risk of trafficking on that specific platform. So if we close a look into the, for example, the there are indicative of exploitation, for example, when there's a third-party involvement managing, which can be noticed if we closely look into their phone numbers advertised in multiple websites or ads, the use of similar language, grammar, and punctuation errors, unconventional sex ads, obscured and hidden faces, edited photos or staged video settings. These are, as I said, like in the Latvian case, anything that looks like a stage, that's already quite an indicative that there's a third party involved in this, what is called the self-generated videos or the photos. So now there is a lot of discussion around how we can tackle this growing problem. And there is a lot of discussion now in the EU, and I was asked by the organizers to look at the legal landscape in Europe. This problem has led to amendments and development of key laws in the EU and Europe. The first one of the EU Anti-Trafficking Directive, which was amended in 2024, both and now includes several crucial provisions, both to prevent and prosecute technology-facilitated and enable trafficking. Notably, there is an acknowledgement through the paragraph 8 that the crime of trafficking is increasingly committed or facilitated by means of information and communication technologies. And then through the Article 18, it calls the member states to take appropriate measures, taking into account the specificities of the various forms of exploitation, such as education, training, and campaigns, where relevant with specific attention to online dimension. The directive now also obligates the states to improve its digital capacities and expertise to keep up with tech developments, and ensures the level of penalties for trafficking reflects higher opprobrium for more serious conduct and more harmful and longer-lasting impact they have on victims. It amplifies on the effect of the dissemination of exploitative material, including dissemination in closed groups accessible to a limited number of participants. So the directive is one of these parts of directive that calls on the member states to provide an aggravating circumstances the dissemination by means of ICT or images or videos or similar materials of sexual nature involve the victim. So the second crucial piece is the legislation of EU's Digital Services Act, which is now provides a set of rules that will be that is applicable across the EU. It applies to intermediary services targeting EU users, including hosting, caching, and providers stricter obligations on very large online platforms. So the very large online platforms in the EU is now classified as platforms with more than 45 million users in the EU, which is 10% of the EU population. So it provides an easy and very clear ways to report illegal content, goods and services on online platforms, and imposes due diligence obligations to platforms and strong obligation for very large platforms. So it also mandates transparency and content moderation, mandates risk assessments to identify and mitigate risks. So it's more of a preventive mechanism that is provided. Another important legislation that is actually developed before the EU Digital Services Act came into effect is the UK Online Safety Act, which was adopted in 2023. So I will just give the key aspects of the UK Online Safety Act is that it has a huge focus on children. The Act prioritizes protecting children from harmful and age-appropriate content, with platforms required to implement measures to prevent the access and provide clear reporting channels. It puts actually duties on platforms. Social media companies and research services are now legally responsible for user safety, including assessing and mitigating risks on the harm. Illegal content removal is one of the good areas of this act is that the platforms must take down illegal content immediately, including content related to terrorism, anything that relates to the harm, but child sexual abuse and trafficking is within it. And this act also provides the age assurance, and services with age restrictions must use effective technologies to verify the user's age and prevent underage access. So one of the good areas of the act that it also provides, it also creates or provides mandates the institutions like Ofcom, which is the communication agency of the UK, is now responsible for ensuring that companies comply with the Online Safety Act and they have effective systems in place to protect users from harm. Our office has been now requested to provide comment to the guidance that is specifically developed as a standard operating procedures that will implement the UK online safety and guidance of the Ofcoms that specifically targets children and women online. So why we're focused on policies online platforms? I heard one of the previous speakers also discussing about how we can work with to prevent victims to fall into traps of traffickers. In the OEC, we believe that such an obligation should be on online platforms. Why? Because their resource infrastructure are being misused by traffickers. Their services are involved in every stage of trafficking. They have access to data and information and can see the patterns. They have the financial resources and expertise. These platforms are wealthy. Their action and inaction facilitates trafficking, and there are already concrete cases of online platforms being involved in trafficking. So in our approach in the OEC, we focus on how we can make the online platforms more liable into what is happening against vulnerable adults and children in their platforms. So there are a set of recommendations that we have developed, and they're also accessible on our website. And we'll not go into all of them, but there are 3 of them that I would like to mention. Is that the states should now ensure that technology facilitated trafficking is covered by the national legislation criminalizing human trafficking and relevant code of criminal procedure. They have to. So the self-regulation of online platforms has proven to be ineffective. So enhances the state-led regulatory frameworks is the way to go. And the strong prevention measures should then include safety by design, age verification, high visibility content removal request, and then liability for harm caused by content on the platform's exploitation. So, and transparency standards regarding the report, which is now the EU directive is calling for. And of course, there's a stronger cooperation between the states. So one of the areas, and it was very interesting that we met just a few days ago with a Spanish NGO who have done also a very good educational advertising campaign, is that they looked at the so-called agencies that are being created across Spain that they are kind of influencers that promote the registration of young girls in OnlyFans websites. So what the NGO did is that they created a mock similar website, which is called Good Agency. And then to just understand what's the scale, who are those people who actually would like to register in OnlyFans? And they were surprised to see there are 2 groups of women being registered for OnlyFans across Spain. These are the women who are very young, because they just don't know, as one of the speakers said, the risks of harms that they can see. They think it's just posing the nice photos and getting some payments. So they're groomed, very brainwashed, very significant. And the second group is economically deprived, particularly women with small children. So this has led them to create a mock website and then talk to, through the chatbot, talk to those people that actually try to register through these good agencies, that they think it's a real agency to register OnlyFans, and then dissuade them from registering, providing them with the risks. I think we think in OEC it's very good from the point of view on how we can also educate those people who are at risk of trafficking. So there are 2 groups that we will be focusing across the year. Is looking at the states that has to take the obligation through the adoption of laws and national action plans and policy documents that obligate the platforms, but also to take the measures to raise awareness on online risks and provide preemptive and preventive measures. Thank you very much. And this is, you can also access our documents through our website under the technology, OEC technology. Thank you very much.
Навколо чату тут стоїть буква У, а ось за сердечко що?
Шановні колеги, нагадую, що якщо ви не
Dear
виступаєте,
colleagues, I remind you that if you do not speak, you should not turn on your microphone. Tarana, thank you very much for your speech. Our onlookers ask, you mentioned website, but they couldn't see well the link to your website with your recommendations. Could you share the link in the chat so that people could check your website later?
Yes, of course, I will do that.
Дякую вам дуже. І ми переходимо
Thank you very much. And we switch from European context to American context. And American context will be told us by Taina Yenemi, Executive Director for Coalition Against Trafficking Women. Taina, please, your floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, beautiful. I am going to, sorry, show the slide from beginning. Okay, first, thank you, everyone. Greetings from New York, and thank you to Maria and Ella for organizing this important convening. So the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women briefly is one of the oldest organizations that is dedicated to ending the trafficking, sexual exploitation, and prostitution of women and girls worldwide. And we see these challenges as forms of violence against women and girls, predominantly male violence and state-sanctioned violence against women and girls. And we work on, we advocate for strong laws and policies, and especially a change of culture to prevent these human rights abuses from occurring. And I'm talking specifically about culture because I will briefly look at the origins of the terminology of pornography and prostitution. I understand that the terminology of sex work and sex positivity is also
Taina, I'm so
yes.
sorry. We got kicked off, me and the interpreter as well. Can you please start again with the
Sorry, Taina, connection problems.
No problem.
Thank you so
Can you
much.
hear me?
I'm sorry. Yes, we can hear you all right.
And how far should I go back?
The next sentence after when it was founded.
Oh, okay. So briefly, since 1988, the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women has been working to change laws and policies and also change culture to prevent and combat the trafficking, sexual exploitation, and the prostitution of women and girls. We do so through primarily legal advocacy and pushing for recognition that we need a change in culture to prevent and combat trafficking and sexual exploitation of women and girls. So I will talk a little bit about the culture and terminology because it's important to go back to the roots and exactly know what we are talking about when we are talking about pornography and prostitution. I understand that also in Ukraine, as in most countries around the world, the terminology of quote unquote sex work and sex positivity are widespread, and I will give a brief overview of how language shapes our views and our laws and our acceptance of violence and sexual exploitation against women and girls. And then I will briefly go over Ukraine's obligations under human rights principles and international law. And then finally to continue the conversation around the prior brilliant presentations, especially my colleague from OSCE, to look at what types of laws need to be both implemented and enacted to combat online sexual exploitation. So briefly, it's again, as in all forms of harmful cultural practices against women and girls, it's important to go back to the system of the patriarchy and how pornography, which as we know is prostitution, except that there is a camera and a screen involved. The definition of pornography in ancient Greek is actually the depiction of a female slave. And so it's also important that prostitution was invented. It is not something that is inevitable. And I will use interchangeably the word prostitution and pornography for purposes of this talk. So you will see that from Mesopotamia to, I don't know if you could see the Hustler. Hustler was one of the first pornographic magazines in the 60s and 70s, along with Playboy. So the concept of sexual exploitation and sexual violence in the form of pornography and prostitution has been embedded in our culture and in our laws for a very long time. Briefly, the terminology of sex work and sex positivity were both invented and marketed by the sex trade itself, including pimps and traffickers, specifically to mainstream and normalize sexual exploitation and the prostitution of women and girls. They have been incredibly successful in the last 40 years to mainstream the normalization of.
Вітя, я там все повиключала, вікно я закрила.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
do.
Okay, so briefly, I will look at Ukraine's obligation under human rights principles and international law. So the concept of dignity and worth of the person, starting with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and this concept of inherent dignity and the obligation of member states, including Ukraine, to ensure equality and the enjoyment of inalienable rights, especially of women and girls, runs throughout all of the international human rights principles and human rights international law. So the Convention for the Suppression of the Traffic in Persons and of the Exploitation of Prostitution of Others also talks about prostitution as being incompatible with the dignity and worth of the human person, which Ukraine has ratified in 1954 and therefore has an obligation to implement domestically. We'll go back to the Article 6 of CEDAW, so the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, which Ukraine has ratified in 1981, also mandates states parties to take measures, including legislation, to suppress all forms of traffic in women and the exploitation of prostitution, which we know is happening online at an alarming pace, as my predecessors of this talk have mentioned. The CEDAW Committee's General Recommendation number 19 also looks at the propagation of pornography as a form of violence and discrimination against women and girls, which also contributes to society's view of women as sexual objects rather than as full human beings deserving of human rights, and which deprives women of equality of their fundamental freedoms. We know well the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish the trafficking in persons, especially women and children, which Ukraine has ratified in 2004. And so what the Palermo Protocol gives us is the internationally agreed upon definition of trafficking. And importantly, it does make a link between sex trafficking and the exploitation of prostitution. In its definition, also part of the definition, a key concept that consent to one's exploitation is irrelevant. So we hear a lot, particularly in the context of online pornography sites, whether it's OnlyFans, which I will talk a little bit about in a few slides from now, or sugar dating, sugaring, which are also pornography and prostitution sites. The fact that young women, or anyone else so-called signs up on their own volition, that consent is irrelevant to the exploitation that they face on these platforms. also important, which was mentioned before, is that Article 9.5 would mandate Ukraine and other states parties to target the demand that fosters exploitation, including exploitation of prostitution. The UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, Rimal Salem, published in June 2024 a groundbreaking seminal report on prostitution and violence against women and girls. It was the first time in the history of the UN system that we do have a report that specifically talks about prostitution as violence against women. And I highly recommend a thorough reading of the report. In it, there are many mentions of pornography as a form of filmed prostitution, and that it is a human right, that prostitution is a human rights violations that must be addressed by member states. Okay, so pornography is the commodification and normalization of sexual violence and exploitation. I like to use this quote a lot when we talk about culture, where Professor Catherine McKinnon does say, we are living in the world that pornography has made. So Tarana spoke about OnlyFans. So it was founded in 2016. It is a pornography site. I won't repeat what Tarana has said in terms of how content is created, and I put content creator in quotes, because of our culture, young girls, particularly economically vulnerable, or if we look at, for instance, another pornography prostitution site, Seeking Arrangement, and there are a number of other dating sites, what they call sugaring sites, where you have young women who go on so-called dates online with older men who are sugar daddies. There is a report, it has not been released yet, but there was a report by a gynecologist from the Empower Center here in New York that has done a study, a profile of the women who do sign on to these sites. And to date, each one of them has had what is known as adverse childhood sexual trauma. So either there was incest involved, or these young women have had some form of sexual violence in their childhood. So that is generally the population that we see, economically, abuse of power and abuse of vulnerability, as listed as a means under the Palermo Protocol, that are ingredients to young women, as we heard, particularly women who find themselves in situations of vulnerability, whether it's war or conflict or other forms of acute vulnerability that are favorable to sexual exploitation for the profit of third parties. So how does this creation of content occur? So OnlyFans is a third-party exploiter, so it is a pimp, so to speak. It takes 20% from the creator's revenues. It's also, as mentioned, an extremely predatory recruitment tool. And in addition to OnlyFans, as was mentioned by Tarana, there are a number of other entities throughout the world. In particular, there are warehouses in New Zealand and Australia that encourage young women to increase the production of the so-called contents that they put on. Increasingly violent. They recommend up to 20 videos per week. And they also take 30% of whatever revenues that these young women receive. And so not only does OnlyFans generate $6.6 billion, according to 2024 statistics, but you also have these other niche, how do you call them? Yes, they're just additional third-party exploiters that that also reap enormous benefit from the exploitation and prostitution of these young women. Many of you may have heard about this young woman, 23-year-old British woman called Lily Phillips, who is an OnlyFans so-called content creator. She advertised an event to engage in sexual acts with 101 men in 24 hours. There is a movie about this, a short video about this, which is actually extremely disturbing. You see men lined up to her house. They each had 1 to 3 minutes to engage in prostitution with this young woman. Lily did say that she was totally dissociated during the majority of the experience and could only remember her interaction with 10 men. And we don't really know the background of this particular young woman, except that she started being engaged with online pornography at the age of 11, and says that she does not know life without pornography. There have been many comments as to whether this was acceptable. There have been calls to shut down OnlyFans. But nevertheless, I think that the normalization of this type of sexual violence online has actually increased interest in OnlyFans, and there is very, very little discussion as to what the state can do, what law enforcement can do to, one, target the men who abused her and raped her, and also to look at the structure of OnlyFans and how to shut it down. And why is it that we can't shut down, or why is it that it is so difficult to shut down these online pornography and prostitution sites? I will give you the example of the United States. In 2019, the Allow States and Victims to Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, also known as FOSTA-SESTA, was enacted, except for very remote case. It has never been implemented by the United States, but it basically is a surgical amendment to the Communications Act of 1996. There's the Communications Decency Act, where with the advent of the internet in the early 90s, there was a recognition that the increase of child sexual abuse material, also known as child pornography, was proliferating online. And because the internet was a burgeoning industry, and many internet service providers did not want the government to restrict them, what they did in the Communications Decency Act, which was specifically to end child sexual abuse material distribution online, they carved out an exception known as Section 230, which basically says that third-party, that an internet service provider is not responsible for third-party content. So if you have an internet website and you put up an item to sell, that website did not want to be responsible should that item be defective. But what this exception did is that it just generated an explosion of online pornography sites, prostitution sites, sex trafficking sites. So it was never intended, Section 230 was never intended to provide legal protection to these websites, but it did. And so we had many campaigns. One was Craigslist, which was an online website through which you could date or find an apartment or a roommate or buy a refrigerator. It made $122 million. This is 2010. from its erotic services. We were able to shut down Craigslist, and then Backpage, which some of you may remember, immediately took advantage of the shutdown of Craigslist, and Backpage was an epicenter of sex trafficking and prostitution online, with 99% of its revenues attributable to prostitution-relating advertisement. So these are the owners and operators of Backpage. And as Tarana had mentioned, what was unique here with Backpage is that just to give you a little bit of background, what happened was a number of plaintiffs, particularly adolescent girls, started suing Backpage for facilitating their sex trafficking and profiting from their prostitution. And every time the courts would say, our hands are tied, we recognize that Backpage is very much involved in the sex trafficking and prostitution of these in particular girls. However, because of Section 230, we cannot do anything. And so there were congressional hearings which found that the Backpage owners and managers actually were active in, which is also happening with OnlyFans and other websites today, were actively involved in promoting and editing, in helping pimps and traffickers hone their messages online so that they could then speak in code and attract more sex buyers for the women and girls that they sold. And so there was so much backlash when FOSTA SESTA was enacted in the US that the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women prepared a little infographic, which I could send later. I'm probably running out of time, but it basically says, if you are not a website that knowingly facilitates sex trafficking and promotes prostitution, which is pimping, at the federal level in the US, then you are not liable. However, if you do knowingly do so, then FOSTA SESTA would apply to you. It does not target individuals, which is what we had heard. It does not prevent people from exchanging information, but it really is a law which I would advise every jurisdiction to pass that collects evidence and data from websites, and not just for child exploitation, but for it really, you focus on actually the website that knowingly facilitates sexual exploitation and the prostitution of human beings. So again, we have not implemented this law. That is going to be our next, well, it's an ongoing battle to help law enforcement and prosecutors recognize the immense damage and the multi-billion-dollar industry of sexual exploitation and prostitution that is occurring online. But again, this journey is not just a legal journey. I gave you a brief overview of the almost sterling legal instruments, both national and international levels. But yeah, this is a cultural journey, and I look forward to continuing it with you. Thank you.
Дякую, Тайна. Дякую дуже за таку.
Thank you, Taina. Thank you for this large overview of presentation that gave us a broader context to discuss this topic. And with your permission, I will invite Ms. Luba Fein, who is representing the organization Voices of Israeli Women who were saved from commercial sexual exploitation in Israel. And she will tell you Israeli experience of exploitation in cyberspace. Lubofein started learning Ukrainian, and she translated her presentation into Ukrainian, and I will allow her to choose which language she wants to speak. I'm looking for my presentation now. I'll try to share. Did anyone see my presentation or no? It's fine. You can speak English because the interpreter is here. Do you see my presentation now? Not yet. What about now? It's loading. It's loading. Now we see it. Online prostitution should be a big topic for state and NGO. We are living in the epoch where digitalization is all spheres in life. It's not only good but evil. The industry of sexual exploitation adapts to digital age. Even Ukraine, with quite progressive laws that you have, finds ways out owing to new technologies and online platform. The law doesn't manage to catch the reality. While politicians think the pimps already start exploitation of women in several clicks. So I address everyone who cares about it. In the nearest years, be very attentive to online prostitution, because it's not marginal phenomenon, but the center of exploitation. Today I will concentrate mainly on Israel, but it's also important for Ukraine. Between Israel and Ukraine and other post-Soviet countries, there are strong channels of trafficking. These are well-known traffickers. They organize international traffic, and they recruit victims, and they easily can recruit them because they have common culture. They promise the work abroad, and women trust them inside the countries because they listen in their own culture, with their own language. And when they find themselves in a new country, they don't know culture, they don't know customs, they feel shame, they hide it from the families, and the pimps have advantage. They have legal documents and they know legal framework. In such a way, victims are caught. There is a broad network also from South America and former Soviet countries. In Israel, such networks started acting starting from 1990 and in the beginning of 2002. But owing to law, we managed to limit them. However, the war in Ukraine created new conditions for exploitation of women, because people in vulnerable state start to be bad at evaluating risks. In the years of the full-scale invasion, we discovered 3 large networks of exploitation of women. Sex exploitation. But when we shut down one of the networks, 3 new arise. Today, it's like a hydra, like a dragon that if you cut off one head, 3 new grow out. And they try to pose as something else. As Rachel Morale and Melissa Farley, online prostitution is masked as free choice, escort, striptease, massage, OnlyFans, etc. But the core is the same: violence and control. This practice of several categories creates illusion of safety, but in reality, it's the same exploitation as pimping. I will describe several ways how prostitution ruins life of women inside Israel, both native Israelites and foreigners. Let's start from OnlyFans, which is a huge international network. In spite of the ban of buying sexual services in Israel, media actively promote OnlyFans, and they promote messages. They always present OnlyFans as independent women who do what they want. In reality, in mass media, there were numerous facts of pimps who supervise the networks of women. They promise large incomes, millions, but average income is about $150 per month. For comparison, minimal salary in Israel is $1,700. So, if you receive at least minimal salary, you are not supposed to be tempted by such incomes. But they present OnlyFans as a network of fans who adore women, but it's absurd. They don't adore women. They use them, and they just consume them. They just want to control over them. And this is a manipulation. This is false presentation. In media, they constantly repeat that OnlyFans is not prostitution. They are not prostitutes. But let's be honest. If a person creates a video with the explicit goal of sexual satisfaction for someone, it's prostitution, just undocumented. But the society is overloaded with these reassuring messages. One more point is sites Sugar Daddy. In Israel, there are several Sugar Daddy sites. Some of them are just called Sugar Daddy. Is based on the description of the site, is for getting romantic acquaintance between men and women. And at the picture you see, they are about the same age, this woman and man. It's like a romantic dating site. Several women who survived prostitution participated in independent journalist investigation, and they registered it in real time. One of the participants opened a chat, and these several hundreds, she received proposal of sexual meeting. She didn't write anything. She just entered the chat, and there were dozens of messages, and it's a standard practice for these sites. After this research, the owner of the site insisted that it's just dating service, and the woman and they block women who seek to sell sexual services, and the same with men who solicit. But I myself went to the site, didn't write anything, and immediately I received proposals to buy sex, basically. Sexual meetings. One more direction is Telegram. Telegram is an open gate for criminal industry. Hundreds of groups of sexualized content are in Telegram. They advertise prostitution, and my daughters and your daughters can enter it. There is no restriction of age. No one tracks it. And the last for today I want to share is recruitment through the internet for prostitution. I register a feminist group. I am supervisor of a group, and once per month I have an account that tries to that tries to advertise prostitution. Usually they show posh life, nice car, etc. And they have this advertisement. A woman started a year ago and now she bought a house for cash. Usually it's related to sugar daddy or OnlyFans or some other prostitution site. There are also announcements specifically targeted for Ukrainians. For Ukrainians, they offer place to live. You don't need experience, but you receive an apartment and no language is required. A doctor, a medical doctor receives 4 times less with no apartment. And of course, it can be a big... some women who are in desperate state might try to go there. And women who survive prostitution witness about the damage that such practice does. About 1,300, among 1,300 survivors of prostitution, 27% of them had to be hospitalized for psychiatric reasons. And more than 20% had malnourishment services. 30% or more tried suicide. And 50% had PTSD. 45% had undiagnosed psychological problems. 11% had infections, STDs basically. 2% were infected with HIV. And 15% were infected with other infectious diseases that are not STDs, like hepatitis or TB. In addition, 22% were hospitalized due to physical diseases that are not psychiatric or infectious. This data is in line with international research, just like research of Ms. Farley and her colleagues that you see here. The percentage is the same. And these victims, these physical injuries, these infections have perpetrators, pimps. It's not a victimless crime. Prostitution does not become less dangerous because it's online. Vice versa, it becomes more insidious. And I want to emphasize now, we combat this phenomenon in spite of Israel having a lot of nice laws. We have ban of prostitution, we have ban of advertisement of prostitution, we have a ban of websites that advertise these activities. And even with all that, implementation is a problem. Police often doesn't want to respond. And when we, women who survived, act against it, and what they hear in answer, you just damage women who enjoy sex and want to make money on it. And what? So why do you do it during the war? And before the end, I found article in New York Times, campaign for decriminalization of pornography in Ukraine. I was shocked by the similarity of rhetorics. The heroines of this article in New York Times are free Ukrainian women who want to have sex. No one mentioned pimps. No one mentions that average gain is $150 per month. They talk about taxes that can be levied upon women who do OnlyFans. No one mentions victims, no one mentions how much will the state pay for rehabilitation of these women. And again, they cite war as justification for creation of sexual industry, instead of condemning of exploiting of vulnerable women. Again, they present sex industry as a collection of women who want to be in prostitution. And they explain that the industry exists just because women want this. That's their will. But economy doesn't work like this. Even legitimate economy doesn't work like this. It's not proposal that creates demand, but demand creates proposition. For example, restaurants do not exist because cooks always are cooking. It's because someone wants to have profit and organizes this all. So when men will refuse to pay for sexual diminishing of women, we will not have prostitution. Ukrainian feminists, you are great. Even at these hard times, you're protecting women's interests here. Do not allow sell it as freedom of expression. Thank you very much. Thank you, Luba. Thank you for your great presentation. And your Ukrainian becomes better and better with each event. And from Israel experience with transiting to Ukrainian experience, we invite Vasil Filonenko, who is methodologist and trainer, Center for Protection of Ukrainian, all Ukrainian organization, Stop Sexting in the Internet. And the topic in his internet is sexting as entrance point to exploitation, challenges in Ukrainian context. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I will turn on the presentation. Please write me in the chat, do you hear me? Yes, we can. Great, I turned on the presentation. It changes, right? Great, great. Thank you very much for inviting me, first of all. Second, thank you, Luba, for her great speech, because we want to discuss it in more detail, because in more about children. And it's great that Luba spoke Ukrainian. Her Ukrainian is very good, in fact. My name is Vasil Filonenko. I'm a teacher in one of the schools of Kiev, and in parallel, I work in the NGO Stop Sexting. We are the organization that was created in 2018 to protect children from sexual violence in the internet, because this topic is extremely underappreciated by Ukrainian society, and I'll tell you why. Now, a couple of words about organizations. We are an organization that conducted first in Ukraine research of sexual violence and exploitation of children in the internet. This is the topic. We will tell you details about third meeting. And we conducted advocacy campaign on the state level to criminalize online grooming. And we already have it in Article 156 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine. It's important. And we organized the second national research of the experience of children online. We create online courses for social workers, for teachers, for school psychologists. If you are interested, we will give you all necessary links. We create training materials, guides for both children and parents. We want to reach everyone we can to improve safety of children in the net. Why is it important? We will talk about this What is sexting in Ukraine? What can it cause? Reasons and consequences of pornographic content reviewed by children. Why this topic? Several months ago, in public field, there was a research of one of the British organizations that, based on their research of darknet, hopefully you know what darknet is, the interest to the topic of Ukrainian women increased by 300%, starting from the... So Ukrainian women is top of searches of criminals in darknet. Probably this includes Russian criminals, but still, we need to talk about it. Why? Children often are interested in sexual content in the internet. Luba mentioned that Telegram is one of the gateways that gives access to children, literally to everything. I had a lesson, 7th form, 12 or 13-year-old children. We were talking about safety, about Telegram. And you know, these children know how to buy drugs through the Telegram. Do you people know that you can buy drugs on the Telegram? Not everyone. Here, I bet you. But children know. So we need to work ahead. And there are several reasons why children review pornography. First, children are interested in this. Because of their age, when they start to become more mature, it's interesting for them how it works. It's interesting for them why children need how they see themselves as adults, how they communicate. Then, easy access. Almost every child has access to the internet. Based on the research, 99% in Ukraine have access to the internet, and 95% at least once per day use this access. Social pressure. In the society, the topics of OnlyFans, webcam, and other ways to make money using sexualized content is legalized. So adults don't see anything bad about it. And if adults don't see a problem with it, tell me please, why should children? If adults say that it's not okay, that it's negative, will children do as they are told? It doesn't work like that. And the last thing is emotional vulnerability of children. We have a full-scale war, and the enemy actively pressures and uses its information technologies against children. Engagement of children into war is one of the topics, and one of the ways to manipulate children is pressure on the children using AIs and materials that show sexual violence against this child and blackmail of this child. What are the risks of review in this context? First, normalization of violence. It was told today, it was mentioned today. Overuse, which means that the child will view this content more and more often, which will affect negatively his or her life and livelihood. Creation, reviewing, and distribution is a crime. Article 301, Part 1. This is also sexual violence against a child. One of the risks mentioned today many times, that criminals can start sextortion based on this. What about statistics? We need to understand this. Just for the context, I'll give you top 5 applications that children use at least once a day. TikTok, 46%. Viber, 51%. Instagram, 66%. YouTube, 70%. Telegram, 86%. This is among children in age of 12 to 15, and 2 of these 3, Viber and Telegram, are to be registered, allow registration only from 16 years of age. Plus, these networks can give children sexual context or phishing content. If you have a TikTok, there is a popular scheme of fake accounts, or maybe non-fake, I don't know. So nice ladies, sexual objectivation, ask you, am I beautiful? So that someone looks at the link and get their data stolen. So also don't forget, Telegram is the platform that everything can be found. Pornography, drug sale, gun sale. This is one of the platforms where sexual platforms against children can be conducted. This is very important. We surveyed about 2,000 people, and two children said that they openly said that they use porno sites. Plus one child admitted they create artificial intelligence to create such data. In reality, of course, there are many more of those. Just most don't admit. As a teacher, I cannot continue without understanding that you understand everything. What is sexting? This is exchange with your own video and text materials of intimate nature using modern communications like mobile phones, emails, social networks, and on the line. My notebook malfunctions for some reason. Let me adjust it. Let's move on. The statistics of sexting. There is statistics from other countries. We conducted this research of 100,000 people. 24% of children tried sexting at least once, which means that the society legalizes sexting, normalizes sexting. So, sharing your own intimate materials is okay for adults. At one of our meetings with the psychologist, we had an interesting discussion on this, because one of the psychologists said, what is so bad about it? I'm sending my own materials, right? But in reality, it can be a very serious problem. Why? Because your phone can be hacked. You can have a quarrel with this friend, and they can revenge on you. 50% of children, based on our survey, encountered situations of online exploitations, like proposals to make money, their own materials of sexual nature, or blackmail, or demanding such materials. We have a very indicative story that we use often. In the spring of 2023, the police identified a 12-year-old girl from Kiev who got into DOS extortion. And in the end, the criminal who did this blackmailed over 200 girls. So the amount of violence can be extremely high. We have stories about 48 girls blackmailed by inmate from Samara city in Russia. So, what was this? Sextortion. Creation by people of intimate trusting relations, and it can get into online grooming when they build relations of trust with the child, and they get not only online but also in real life. Sextortion is for financial gain, and online grooming is for satisfying your own sexual drives. It also has huge scale in Ukraine. No one actually researched this. What do you think? What is the percent of children will never tell about this situation of exploitation to parents? It's interesting to hear from you. What do you think is the percentage? What is the percentage of children who will never tell about these situations to parents? Write in the chat. 99, 70, very high. Maybe I scared you too much. Thank you for your answers. Thank you for interaction. In reality, from 45 to 95%. Really, there is no one number. So it's not too bad. So the real number is 68%. So about 70% will never tell parents about the situation. And only 6% will tell about this to a teacher. But more than 75% will tell their friends. Which shows that we, as people who plan to work with such delicate topic of violence, pornography, we need to understand that this topic is under great taboo. And we need to understand how to get this topic from the shadow so that the society does not legalize it all. Does not say that selling your own nudes is okay. It's not normal. We need to do something about it. Interesting statistic with the experience with pornographic content and violence against children. 6% of children see sexual content every day. Not much, right? But if we take into account that we surveyed 2,000 children and that we have 3 or 4 million children in Ukraine, 6% is not that little amount. 73 children create this content themselves, but not with their consent. So it's self-created content, but they can be blackmailed to create it. It's not their own desire to do it. They are forced to. 35% from the surveyed children met with people they don't know for sex. So they just met a person and went to have sex. What can they meet? In Telegram, there is a bot that is called Davinchik. Does everyone know what it is? 1/3 of children was in a situation of online exploitation. As a teacher, I know, because children tell about this, because it's funny for them. It's fun for them, right? Like, look, from Arab Emirates, they promise $50 for my nudes. I just want to get money and send someone else's nudes or something. So children are not serious about it. What can we do? I'm sorry for my self-assuredness. Maybe these facts you hear for the first time. And thank you very much for coming here and that you listen to this, that you care about this. What can we do? Prevention. Working not just with children, but also with parents, so that children can understand how they can protect themselves in the internet. Have you heard that one of the categories that is registered at the website for, well, OnlyFans, let's just name this site, is minors? And it's not hard to do in spite of this complicated verification system. explanation, training, and education to everyone who, even a colonel of SBU, can be engaged into this. Development of critical thinking based on their age. It's very important. Personal example, very important. And if we are social workers or someone who works in specialized services for children, it's work with the family. And also spreading the materials that can be used for setting up the Telegram. Here's a link, QR code, to the materials of our organizations. There are lessons, guides, how to set up social networks from consoles, computers, browsers, everything you need. It's totally free of charge. As to the procedure, don't worry, Angelica, in session question and answer, we'll talk about it. So, as organizer said, thank you for your attention and stay safe. This is very important. Thank you, Vasil. We don't have much time, I'm afraid. What was the question to you? What is the procedure if we identified some cases of sexual violence? I'm ready to answer. What is important for us? At our website, if you wait for a couple of minutes, we have a guide for specialist SCD, all these services. There is a step-by-step instruction and algorithm of what to do, and all materials that you will need for this. If this is enough for you, I can send it to you. If no, I can describe it in words. So let me know in the chat so that we can save. You can just download this guide and you will use it. I'm sending to you. Vasil, do this. Send the link to me and I will include it to the mailing list of what we are sending in the presentation. Good, good. Not a problem. Then I will send you the guide. Are you not against to the chat? Yes, yes. Send it to the chat by mailing list too. Valentino, are you with us? Yes, Maria. I am with you. Hello, dear participants. I wanted to remind you that to receive the certificate about training, you need to prepare a short description of problems that you encounter in the sphere of your activities on the 3 topics that we will have and what to do in these problems. So, what do you advise to do? Who will do it? And expected results. Send these proposals to the emails that I will send in the chat, and that's it. Thank you, Valentina. We have a couple of more minutes. With your permission, I will just make conclusions for all this and make a couple of comments from myself. As you know, in Ukraine, they are talking again about legalization of production and distribution of pornography in Ukraine. Its developer and advocate and defender says that child pornography will not be touched by this, or what it is called video materials of sexual violence against children. It's important to understand that pornography in general is a form of violence against women, just like prostitution. Prostitution is our next topic. And pornography carries a number of negative consequences. Both the actors, so-called actors, and for consumers, especially children. Vasil mentioned it, but there is one more component. children who watch pornography use sexual violence against other children. They grow and we will have to deal with it. A separate group of risks is women who have sex with men who regularly consume pornography. For them, the risk of violence is higher. So any possible gain from pornography, financial gain, is covered by the danger and risks that it carries. Pornhub, Ukraine is usually in top 20 of largest consumers. Never have seen mentioning in this material, in this advertising materials, about appeal against Pornhub, court procedure against Pornhub, that they have videos of rapes. And they had such a huge leap in rape Ukrainians, etc., that there was a joke. They need to make a separate category, Ukrainians. And in the last years, people who research it mentioned that there are many materials from our occupied territories, Crimea, Donetsk Oblast, Luhansk Oblast, with minors specifically. Vasil mentioned Darknet, and based on unofficial data that was shared by cybersecurity specialists, as of the beginning of the invasion, up to 1/3 of materials with children in Darknet were produced on our occupied territories. For us, it is important that digitalization ministry is involved and other ministries and providers that works with open data to engage them to the process of stopping these materials and stopping access to pornographic materials in the beginning for children, and maybe, hopefully, full ban later to reduce the harm from these materials. As to the materials that you are supposed to send to Valentina to receive your certificate for participation in our events, Valentina already told you, all presentations that we had today, you will receive after the third event to your email in Ukrainian. And there is a question in the chat, and Luba is ready to answer. Luba, can you please voice the question and answer it?
A question about that in New Zealand they have a special system that protects women in the sex industry from exploitation. Like of what we know, we global abolitionists know, in New Zealand decriminalized the system of prostitution, like decriminalized, legalized, the result is the same result. They have legal brothels. And their legal approach is very liberal, very easy to open a brothel, and they have system of protection, but there are basically no protection. And New Zealand has basically no data. They have legal brothels. It is easier to open a brothel than UK journalist Julie Bindel has written that it is easier to open a brothel than to adopt a dog from a shelter, like bureaucratically. Anyone can be in a brothel to be exploited in the brothel, and anyone can be owner of brothel as far as they have no criminal records or there are no foreigners. But in reality, they don't have any record. When they passed this law, they promised there will be inspections of brothels, but there are no inspections. They have no data about exploitation. 5 years after the law passed, they made a follow-up research. The research was conducted by people who promoted the law. So it should be very biased, and still in that research, And that research, the same people who promoted the law, they found out that 1/3 of women in prostitution reported that they had to accept sex buyers when they didn't want to do it, which means, in other words, women under decriminalization law protected, they were raped according to the law, like with protection with the law. So and nothing got changed. There were still no inspections, no changes in the law, no changes of enforcement. So women are just raped. And the amount of women in prostitution is terrible. Like, it just, nobody is counting them. Nobody has any statistics. But when the law has passed, like many years ago, it was, they reported 2,300 women in prostitution. In 2020, like about almost 20 years later, the pro-prostitution group reported that they are in contact, in touch with 7,500 people. Like, and not everyone in prostitution contacts them, which is some, maybe 10%, maybe 5%, we don't know. So the amount of prostituted women is insane in New Zealand. They're legally raped, and nothing is trying to change anything. So this is New Zealand decriminalization. If we want the same model, we can adopt it, but we don't want, right? Sorry for being alone. Becoming emotional when I speak about.
Дякую, Любо, дякую за це уточнення.
Thank you, Luba. Thank you for this answer. Vasilio, you wanted to add something? First of all, thank you for your question. One more point about the consequences. Based on the latest research, the consumption of pornographic content by minors negatively impacts cognitive abilities of children in future. So it's very dangerous, just to mention it. Yes, it's mentioned. There was a research like this. And also men who regularly consume pornography lose empathy to women and considerably easier tolerate violence against women by other men. We spoke about key points, pornography as a violence against women. The next event will be about prostitution on 29th, about the document that Taina mentioned, the report of the special reporter of UN for counteraction, Arima Salem, where she mentioned pornography. We also plan to translate it into Ukrainian and add it to the materials that we will send out in mailing lists. See you in the next event on the 29th. Thank you for being with us. Thank you. Thank you, UN Women, Maria. Thank you to the interpreter.
Дякую, до побачення.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Дякую. Дякую всім, до побачення.
Дякую.
Дякую.
Дякуємо.
До побачення.
Вам дякуємо.
Дякую, до побачення.
На все добре.
До побачення, дякую.
Да, вам дякуємо.
Вітати.